In a quiet neighborhood, on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks. Mrs. Evelyn Harper, a frail yet spirited elderly black woman, was making her way home from the grocery store. Her steps were slow and deliberate, weighed down not just by age but also by two heavy bags filled with essentials canned goods, bread and fresh vegetables she had carefully picked out for dinner. Evelyn lived alone since her husband passed, away 5 years ago. Despite her loneliness, she carried herself with dignity, always dressed neatly in modest clothes. Today, she wore a floral print dress paired with a faded denim jacket that once belonged to her late husband. She clutched her purse tightly against her side as she navigated the uneven pavement, humming softly under her breath, habit she'd developed over decades of solitude. The street seemed peaceful enough. Children played tag nearby while their parents chatted idly on porches. But beneath this veneer of calm, there lingered an undercurrent of tension. This wasn't a new feeling for Evelyn. Over the years, she had grown accustomed to being watched, more closely than others when walking through certain parts of town or entering stores. It wasn't something she liked to dwell on, it simply was. Yet today, something felt different. Strange unease prickled at the edges of her mind, but she couldn't quite put her finger on why. As Evelyn approached the corner of Maple Street, where she needed to cross, she noticed a police car parked haphazardly near the curb. Its lights weren't flashing, but its presence immediately drew attention. Standing beside it was Officer Richard Grisanaman, whose reputation preceded him. He was known around the community as someone who often let his biases dictate how he treated people. Some whispered about his harsh interrogations during traffic stops, or the way he spoke dismissively to residents who didn't look like him. Others avoided crossing paths with him altogether if they could help it. Officer Grayson stood leaning against his cruiser, arms crossed, scanning the area with narrowed eyes. His gaze landed on Evelyn almost instantly. For reasons unknown to her, he pushed off the car and began striding toward her. Evelyn slowed her pace instinctively, clutching her grocery bags tighter. "Evenin'," she said politely, as he stopped directly in front of her, blocking her path. "What are you doing here?" he demanded abruptly, his tone sharp and accusatory. "I'm going home," Evelyn replied calmly, meeting his gaze despite the knot forming in her stomach. "I live right up the road," Grayson sneered slightly, glancing at the contents of her shopping bags before looking back at her face. "You sure these groceries belong to you? It looks expensive for someone like you." The comment stung, but Evelyn refused to let it show. She straightened her posture, every bit the proud woman she had always been. "These are mine," she said firmly. "Now if you'll excuse me," but Grayson wasn't done. Without warning, he reached forward, grabbing one of the bags from her hands. Startled, Evelyn stumbled backward, nearly losing her balance. "Hey!" she protested, reaching out to take the bag back. "That's my stuff." Instead of handing it over, Grayson shoved her roughly by the shoulder, sending her sprawling onto the ground. Pain shot through Evelyn's knees as they scraped against the rough asphalt, and her purse tumbled beside her. Gasps echoed from the nearby porch as neighbors witnessed what happened. Frozen in shock, for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Evelyn sat there on the cold pavement, stunned and humiliated, staring up at the officer towering above her. Tears welled in her eyes, not because of the physical pain, though that was real, but because of the sheer injustice of it all. How dare he treat her this way, just because of the color of her skin? Before anyone could react, a voice rang out from somewhere behind them. "Mom." Evelyn turned weakly toward the sound, relief flooding her features even as dread settled into the pit of her stomach. Standing at the edge of the scene, having just arrived home from work, was her son Marcus. Tall, broad-shouldered, and exuding authority in his tailored suit, Marcus cut an imposing figure. And as soon as Officer Grayson saw him, his smug expression faltered. Marcus took one look at his mother on the ground, then shifted his piercing gaze to the officer. "What did you do?" he asked, in a dangerously calm voice, each word dripping with barely contained fury. And for the first time that day, Officer Grayson's face turned pale. Marcus Harper stood frozen for a split second, his sharp eyes darting. Between his mother on the ground and the officer who now looked visibly uneasy, The air crackled with tension as Marcus quickly assessed the scene before him. His heart pounded in his chest, not out of fear, but from the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. He clenched his fists tightly at his sides, fighting to keep his emotions in check long enough to understand what had happened. "Mom," Marcus said again, softer this time, stepping forward to kneel beside Evelyn. She reached up weakly, her trembling hand finding his arm as if seeking reassurance that he was really there. Her face was etched with pain, both physical and emotional, but she managed a small, brave smile when their eyes met. "I'm okay, son," she whispered. Though her voice betrayed the lie, Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he gently helped her to her feet, brushing off the dirt from her dress and inspecting the scrapes on her knees. Then, without saying another word, he turned his full attention to Officer Grayson. The policeman had taken a step back, his earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of Marcus's presence. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool breeze drifting through the neighborhood. "What did you do to her?" Marcus repeated, his tone low and deliberate. Each syllable carried the weight of authority, leaving no room for evasion or excuses. Grayson swallowed hard, fumbling for words. She resisted me. I was just trying to make sure nothing illegal was going on here." Marcus raised an eyebrow, skepticism written all over his face. "Illegal? My mother was walking home from the grocery store. You call helping an elderly woman carry her bags illegal?" The neighbors who had been watching silently from their porches began whispering among themselves. Some nodded approvingly at Marcus's defense of his mother, while others exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of it. A few even pulled out their phones, ready to record whatever might happen next. Grayson shifted uncomfortably, his fingers twitching near the holster of his gun. "Oh, look, I don't need any trouble here. Just let me do my job." "Your job?" Marcus shot back, his voice rising slightly. "Your job is supposed to be protecting people, not assaulting them. Or does your badge only work one way?" Evelyn placed a gentle hand on her son's arm, sensing the growing storm brewing inside. "Him. Marcus, please," she murmured softly. Don't give him more reason to act poorly. But Marcus wasn't about to back down. Not this time. For years, he'd heard stories from his mother and countless others in their community about run-ins with officers like Grayson, stories of disrespect, profiling, and outright abuse. He'd always promised himself that if he ever witnessed something like this firsthand, he wouldn't stand idly by. And now, seeing his own mother treated so cruelly, he felt a fire ignite within him, a fire fueled not just by rage, but by justice. "You're going to explain yourself right now," Marcus demanded, taking a step closer to Grayson. "And then you're going to apologize to my mother." Grayson opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, a new voice joined the fray. "That's enough." It's called Mrs. Thompson, an older white woman who lived 2 doors down from Evelyn. She stepped off her porch, holding her phone aloft. "I recorded everything, officer. From the moment you grabbed her groceries to when you pushed her to the ground. So unless you want this footage sent straight to the chief of police, I suggest you start explaining yourself." A murmur rippled through the crowd as heads turned toward Mrs. Thompson. Even Evelyn looked surprised. Though they weren't particularly close, the gesture touched her deeply. It wasn't often someone outside their community stood up for them. So boldly, Grayson's face turned even paler if that was possible. He glanced nervously at Mrs. Thompson, then back at Marcus, clearly realizing he was cornered. "Fine," he muttered begrudgingly. "I'll file a report later. Don't think this is over." "Oh, it's far from over," Marcus replied coldly. "Because tomorrow morning, I'll be paying a visit to the precinct. Can't trust me. They'll hear every detail of what happened here today." With that, Grayson retreated hastily to his patrol car, slamming the door shut behind him. The engine roared to life, and he sped away, leaving skid marks on the asphalt. The crowd erupted into murmurs once again. Some cheering quietly while others shook their heads in disbelief. Marcus turned back to his mother, his expression softening instantly. "Are you hurt badly?" he asked, concern replacing the fury. In his voice, Evelyn shook her head, though tears still glistened in her eyes. "Just shaken, sweetheart. I'll be fine." Mrs. Thompson approached them cautiously, offering a sympathetic smile. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry this happened to you. If there's anything I can do—" "Thank you, Nancy," Evelyn replied warmly, accepting the kindness with grace. "You've already done more than enough." As the crowd slowly dispersed, Marcus helped his mother gather her scattered belongings. Though the immediate danger had passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that this incident was far bigger than just one bad cop. This was about systemic injustice, about decades of mistreatment and prejudice, cloaked in uniforms and badges. And as he guided his mother toward their house, he made a silent vow. He would fight not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been wronged in this way. Little did Marcus know, however, that his actions that day would set off a chain reaction neither he nor anyone else could have anticipated. The following morning, Marcus woke up with a heavy heart but a clear mind. Sleep had eluded him for most of the night. Every time he closed his eyes, images of his mother lying on the ground replayed in his mind. He couldn't shake the anger not just at Officer Grayson, but at the system that allowed such behavior to persist unchecked. Still, Marcus knew anger alone wouldn't solve anything. Action would. After ensuring Evelyn was comfortable and had everything she needed for the day, Marcus headed out early. His destination, the local police precinct. But before he went there, he stopped by a small cafe downtown, a quiet spot where he often met friends or colleagues to discuss important matters. Today, however, he wasn't meeting anyone casually. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd saved years ago. "Hello?" answered a familiar voice on the other end. "It's Marcus," he said firmly. "I need your help." There was a brief pause before the voice replied, "Of course, tell me what happened." By the time Marcus arrived at the precinct, he was no longer alone. Accompanying him was attorney Rachel Bennett, sharp and compassionate lawyer known for taking on cases involving civil rights violations. Dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, Rachel carried herself with an air of authority that commanded respect. She had agreed to meet Marcus after hearing the details of the incident, promising to do whatever it took to hold Officer Grayson accountable. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was tense. Officers moved about briskly, some casting curious glances toward Marcus and Rachel as they approached the front desk. A young receptionist looked up nervously when Marcus asked to speak with the chief of police. "I'm sorry," she stammered, avoiding eye contact. "The chief isn't available right now. Can I take a message?" Marcus arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. "This isn't optional," he said evenly. "Tell whoever's in charge that we're filing a formal complaint against Officer Richard Grayson, and if they don't want this going public today, someone better see us immediately." The receptionist hesitated, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. Just as she reached for the phone, a tall, broad-shouldered man emerged from a nearby office. It was Deputy Chief Harris, a stern-looking figure with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for being fair-minded, if not overly cautious. "What's going on here?" Harris asked, his tone firm but measured. Rachel stepped forward, extending her hand. "Deputy Chief Harris, my name is Rachel Bennett, and this is Marcus Harper. We're here regarding an incident involving one of your officers, Richard Grayson. Mr. Harper's mother was assaulted yesterday afternoon, and we have evidence proving misconduct. We'd like to file a formal complaint and request an internal investigation." Harris's expression darkened slightly, but he nodded curtly. "Come with me," he said, leading them into a private conference room once inside. Marcus recounted the events of the previous day in detail, while Rachel placed Mrs. Thompson's video footage on the table. Harris watched silently, his jaw tightening as the truth unfolded before him. When the video ended, the room fell silent for a moment. "This is serious," Harris finally admitted, rubbing his temples. "If these allegations are true, then disciplinary action will be taken. However, you must understand that investigations take time. We'll review the evidence thoroughly and ensure due process is followed." Marcus leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Due process is fine, but let's be clear. This isn't just about my mother. This is about accountability. If Officer Grayson gets off lightly or worse, if nothing happens at all, it sends a message that this kind of behavior is acceptable. I won't stand for that." Harris held up a hand, signaling for calm. "You have my word that this won't be swept under the rug. In fact, Given the severity of the incident, I'll personally oversee the investigation, but I also urge patience. These things can't be rushed. Though far from satisfied, Marcus reluctantly agreed to wait for now. As they left the precinct, Rachel turned to him with a reassuring smile. "We've made progress," she said, "but the fight isn't over yet. Are you prepared for what comes next?" Marcus nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely. Whatever it takes." Later that evening, word of the incident began spreading beyond the neighborhood. Thanks to Mrs. Thompson sharing the video online, it quickly gained traction on social media platforms. By nightfall, hashtags like #JusticeForEvelyn and #HoldCopsAccountable were trending locally. People shared their own stories of mistreatment by law enforcement, turning Evelyn's case into a symbol of broader systemic issues. At home, Evelyn sat quietly in her living room, watching the news coverage unfold. She felt conflicted grateful for the support, but uneasy about becoming the center of attention. Marcus noticed her discomfort and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Mom, I know this is overwhelming," he said softly, "but you didn't deserve what happened to you. No one does. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about making sure no one else has to go through this." Evelyn looked at her son, pride shining in her eyes, despite the tears threatening to spill over. "You've always been so strong, Marcus. Stronger than I ever was. Just promise me one thing." "Anything," Marcus replied. "Promise me you won't lose yourself in this fight. Stay grounded. Stay kind." Marcus nodded, squeezing her hands gently. "I promise, Mom." As the night wore on, the ripple effects of Evelyn's story continued to grow. What started as a single act of injustice was fast becoming a catalyst for change. But amidst the mounting pressure and growing public outcry, one question lingered in everyone's minds: would justice truly be served? The next few days were a whirlwind of activity for Marcus and Evelyn. What had started as a private family matter had spiraled into something far larger, drawing attention not just from their community, but also from activists, journalists, and even local politicians. The video of Officer Grayson's actions had gone viral, sparking outrage across social media platforms. Protesters began gathering outside the police precinct, holding signs that read "Protect our elders" and "Enough is enough." For Evelyn, the sudden spotlight was overwhelming. She had always been a quiet woman who preferred to stay out of the limelight, content with her simple life. But now, reporters camped outside her modest home, eager to hear her side of the story. Neighbors stopped by frequently, some offering words of encouragement, others asking if they could help in any way. Despite the chaos, Evelyn handled it all with grace. Though Marcus could see the toll it was taking on her, "You don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to," Marcus reminded her one evening as they sat together in the living room. The TV droned softly in the background, replaying clips of news anchors discussing the case. "I know," Evelyn replied softly, staring at her hands. "But maybe this is bigger than me. If telling my story can help someone else, then I'll do it. I just hope it doesn't make things worse." Marcus nodded, understanding her concerns. He knew how delicate situations like this could become. Public scrutiny often brought unintended consequences, both good and bad. Still, he admired his mother's courage. Even after everything she'd endured, she was willing to use her voice to fight for change. Meanwhile, inside the police precinct, tensions were running high. Deputy Chief Harris had launched an internal investigation into Officer Grayson's conduct. But whispers of dissent among the officers were growing louder. Some defended Grayson, claiming he was being unfairly targeted because of his reputation. Others kept silent, fearing retaliation if they spoke out against their colleague. Morale was low, and trust within the department was eroding rapidly. Officer Grayson himself seemed to have disappeared from public view. Rumors swirled about him being placed on administrative leave, though no official statement had been released. When questioned by investigators, Grayson maintained his innocence, insisting that Evelyn had resisted him during what he called a routine check. However, the video evidence and Mrs. Thompson's testimony made his claims increasingly difficult to believe. As the investigation dragged on, frustration mounted among those seeking justice. Protesters grew restless, demanding answers that weren't coming quickly enough. At a rally organized by local activists, Marcus found himself standing behind a podium, addressing a crowd of hundreds. It wasn't something he'd planned, just happened. Someone handed him a microphone, and suddenly all eyes were on him. "I never wanted this," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "My mom didn't deserve what happened to her, and neither does anyone else in this community. This isn't just about one officer, it's about a system that allows people like him to think they're above accountability. We're here today because we refuse to stay silent anymore." The crowd erupted in applause, chanting his name and cheering loudly. Marcus felt a surge of emotion, not pride exactly, but a sense of purpose. For so long, he'd carried the weight of injustice silently, unsure of how to channel his anger constructively. Standing before these people who shared his pain, he realized he wasn't alone. But not everyone supported the movement. Critics argued that the protests were divisive, accusing Marcus and others of exaggerating the situation for attention. Some even claimed that Officer Grayson was simply doing his job, a narrative perpetuated by certain news outlets and online trolls. Marcus tried to ignore the negativity, focusing instead on the progress they were making. Late at night, when he lay awake thinking about everything, the criticism gnawed at him. One evening, as Marcus scrolled through social media, he stumbled upon a comment that caught his eye. It wasn't hateful or dismissive. Rather, it was heartfelt and sincere. Written by a young woman named Sarah, the post described her own experience with police misconduct. She thanked Marcus and Evelyn for speaking up, saying their bravery gave her hope that real change was possible. Moved by her words, Marcus reached out to Sarah privately, thanking her for sharing her story. They exchanged messages back and forth, bonding over their shared desire for justice. Over time, Sarah became a valuable ally, helping organize events and spread awareness about systemic issues within law enforcement. Despite the challenges, small victories began to emerge. Local officials announced plans to review police training protocols, emphasizing de-escalation techniques and cultural sensitivity. A town hall meeting was scheduled, inviting residents to voice their concerns directly to law enforcement leaders. Though these steps were only the beginning, they represented a glimmer of hope in an otherwise turbulent time. Still, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest battles were yet to come. As the days turned into weeks, he prepared himself for whatever lay ahead, determined to honor his mother's strength and resilience. Little did he know, however, that the climax of their struggle would arrive sooner, and in a more unexpected way than anyone anticipated. The town hall meeting was scheduled for a crisp Friday evening, held in the auditorium of the local community center. Word had spread quickly, and by the time Marcus and Evelyn arrived, the room was already packed to capacity. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the space, filled with residents from all walks of life, young and old, black and white, families and individuals. Some carried signs, others notebooks, but every face bore the same expression, determination. At the front of the room stood a long table where Deputy Chief Harris, several city council members, and a representative from the mayor's office sat. Stiffly, they exchanged uneasy glances as the crowd settled in, sensing the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another public forum, it was a reckoning. Marcus guided Evelyn to a seat near the front, assuring she was comfortable before taking his place at the podium beside attorney Rachel Bennett. As he looked out over the sea of faces, he felt a mix of emotions: gratitude for the support, fear of what might come next, and an unshakable resolve to see this through. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Rachel began, her voice calm but commanding. "This is a chance for us to speak honestly about the issues facing our community and to demand accountability from those sworn to protect us." Applause rippled through the audience, followed by murmurs of agreement. Then, one by one, residents stepped up to the microphone to share their stories. There was Mrs. Lewis, whose teenage son had been stopped and searched without cause; Mr. Patel, who recounted how officers refused to take his burglary report seriously; and countless others, each tale more heartbreaking than the last. When Evelyn finally rose to speak, the room fell silent. She walked slowly to the podium, leaning on Marcus's arm for support. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone, but when she began to talk, her voice was steady. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 40 years, she said softly, her words carrying a quiet strength. "I've raised my children here, buried my husband here, and tried to build a life worth living. But on Tuesday afternoon, I learned something painful. I learned that some people see me not as a person, but as a stereotype, a threat, something less than human." Her voice cracked, and for a brief moment she paused to gather herself. Marcus stood nearby, ready to step in if needed, but Evelyn pressed on. "What happened to me shouldn't have happened to anyone. No one deserves to be treated that way, especially not because of the color of their skin. I'm not asking for revenge or punishment. I'm asking for change, real change. Because if we don't fix this now, it will happen again to someone else's mother, grandmother, or child." The room erupted into applause, many people rising to their feet in solidarity. Tears streamed down Evelyn's cheeks, but she smiled. Faintly, knowing she'd spoken her truth, as the meeting continued, tensions escalated. When Deputy Chief Harris took the stage to address the crowd, his attempts to reassure everyone were met with skepticism. "We're committed to reform," he insisted, though his tone lacked conviction. "But these things take time." "Time," shouted a man from the back of the room. "How much more time do we need? How many more Evelyn Harpers have to suffer?" The crowd murmured in agreement, growing restless. Harris shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for the intensity of the backlash. Before he could respond, another voice cut through the noise. "It's not just about time." Marcus interjected, stepping forward. "It's about action, accountability, transparency. You can't keep hiding behind empty promises while people get hurt." Harris opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Everyone turned to see Officer Grayson storming into the room, flanked by 2 fellow officers. His face was red with anger, and his fists were clenched. Tightly at his sides, "You think you can ruin my career over a misunderstanding?" Grayson bellowed, pointing accusingly at Marcus and Evelyn. "This whole thing is a lie." Gasps echoed throughout the auditorium as the crowd reacted with shock and outrage. Protesters surged to their feet, shouting insults and demanding Grayson leave. For a moment, chaos reigned. Rachel stepped forward, raising her hands to calm the crowd. "Officer Grayson, you are out of line," she said sharply. "You have no right to disrupt this meeting. If you have something to say, you can address it properly through the investigation." Grayson hesitated, glaring at Marcus with barely concealed hatred. Then, in a move that stunned everyone, he reached for his belt hand, pulled out his handcuffs. "Placing you under arrest," he snarled, advancing toward Marcus, "for harassment and slander against a police officer." Pandemonium broke loose. Protesters rushed to shield Marcus, forming a human barrier between him and Grayson. Shouts filled the air as people demanded Grayson back off. Even Harris jumped to his feet, yelling for order. "This is unacceptable." Harris roared, stepping between Grayson and the crowd. "Stand down, Officer Grayson, or I'll have you removed immediately." Grayson froze, his chest heaving with rage. For a brief second, it seemed like he might lunge anyway, but then, realizing he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, he lowered his arms and backed away. "This isn't over," he muttered darkly before turning and storming out of the room, his colleagues trailing behind him. As silence slowly returned, Marcus exhaled deeply, his heart pounding. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those who had stood with him. In that moment, he realized something profound. They weren't just fighting for justice anymore. They were building a movement. The aftermath of the chaotic town hall meeting rippled through the community like a storm. News outlets couldn't stop talking about what had happened. Officer Grayson's reckless attempt to arrest Marcus in front of hundreds of witnesses was plastered across headlines, sparking outrage nationwide. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #StandWithMarcus and #JusticeForAll, drawing attention not just to Evelyn's case, but also to countless other stories of police misconduct that had long been ignored for Marcus. The days following the incident were a blur. He became the face of the movement, a reluctant leader, thrust into the spotlight by circumstance. Activists, journalists, and even politicians reached out to him, eager to align themselves with his cause. While some praised his courage, others criticized him for stirring up trouble. Yet despite the pressure mounting around him, Marcus remained steadfast. His focus wasn't on fame or recognition. It was on ensuring that no one else would suffer as his mother had. Evelyn, too, found herself at the center of the whirlwind. Though she preferred to stay out of the public eye, she agreed to participate in interviews when necessary, using her voice to humanize the struggle. Her quiet dignity resonated deeply with people, turning her into an unexpected symbol of resilience. Together, mother and son formed an unbreakable bond, supporting each other through the highs and lows of their newfound roles. Meanwhile, Officer Grayson's actions during the town hall proved to be the final straw for the police department, facing immense scrutiny from both the public and higher authorities. Deputy Chief Harris announced that Grayson had been suspended indefinitely pending further investigation. Additionally, an independent review board was established to oversee cases of alleged misconduct within the foursome move hailed by activists as a step toward accountability. But while progress seemed evident, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Supporters of Grayson rallied outside the precinct, accusing the department of bowing to political correctness and abandoning its officers. Counter-protests erupted almost immediately, with demonstrators demanding stricter reforms and greater transparency. The divide between the two sides grew wider, threatening to tear the community apart. Amidst the chaos, Rachel Bennett worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She filed motions, gathered evidence, and coordinated with legal experts to ensure that Grayson faced consequences for his actions. "This isn't just about one man," she reminded Marcus during one of their strategy meetings. "It's about setting a precedent. If we let this slide, it sends a message that abuse of power is acceptable." Marcus nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was missing from the equation. As much as they fought for justice, he realized they needed allies within the system itself. That realization led him to an unlikely source of support, Deputy Chief Harris. Though initially skeptical of Harris's intentions, Marcus decided to meet with him privately. Over coffee, at a quiet cafe, the two men discussed the challenges facing law enforcement and the community alike. To Marcus's surprise, Harris admitted that he shared many of their concerns. "I didn't sign up for this job to watch my officers mistreat innocent people," Harris confessed, his tone heavy with regret. "But change doesn't happen overnight. It takes effort from everyone involved, including those who've lost faith in us." Marcus listened intently, weighing Harris's words carefully. "Then prove it," he said finally. "Show us you're serious about reform. Work with us, not against us." Harris hesitated briefly before nodding. "I'll do what I can, but I need your help too. You have the trust of the people. Use that to bridge the gap." Their conversation marked a turning point. Slowly but surely, lines of communication began opening between law enforcement and community leaders. Joint workshops were organized, focusing on de-escalation techniques and cultural sensitivity training. Residents were invited to participate in discussions about policing practices, offering feedback and suggestions for improvement. Still, not everyone welcomed these efforts. Critics argued that such initiatives were merely performative, designed to placate protesters without addressing deeper systemic issues. Others feared that collaboration might dilute the movement's momentum, allowing officials to escape real accountability. Despite the skepticism, Marcus refused to give up. He knew compromise wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start. Every small victory mattered, whether it was convincing another resident to attend a workshop or persuading a local business owner to sponsor a youth mentorship program aimed at reducing crime. One evening, as Marcus sat with Evelyn on their porch, watching the sunset, he reflected on how far they'd come and how much farther they still had to go. "Do you think we're making a difference?" he asked quietly. Evelyn smiled, patting his hand gently. "We may not see all the changes right away, sweetheart, but every seed we plant today will grow into something bigger tomorrow, and that's enough." Her words filled Marcus with hope, reminding him why they'd started this journey in the first place. Change was never easy, but together, they were proving it was possible. Months passed, and the once chaotic neighborhood began to transform in subtle yet profound ways. The protests had quieted down, replaced by ongoing dialogues between residents and law enforcement. Officer Grayson's case had finally reached its conclusion after a lengthy investigation and public pressure. He was formally dismissed from the police force and faced criminal charges for assault and abuse of power. Though justice wasn't perfect, it was undeniable proof that accountability could be achieved. For Marcus and Evelyn, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Yet they carried with them the lessons learned during those tumultuous months. What had started as a deeply personal struggle had evolved into something far greater, a movement that brought people together across divides, igniting hope where there had been despair. One crisp Saturday morning, the community gathered at a newly renovated park to celebrate their hard-won progress. The space, once neglected and overgrown, now gleamed with fresh paint, playground equipment, and benches adorned with plaques honoring local heroes, including Evelyn Harper. Her name stood proudly alongside others who had contributed to making the neighborhood a better place. As Marcus pushed Evelyn's wheelchair along the paved pathway, she marveled at the transformation. "It's beautiful," she said softly, her eyes glistening with tears. "I never thought I'd see this day." Marcus smiled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "You made this happen, Mom. All of us did, together." The ceremony began with speeches from community leaders, activists, and even Deputy Chief Harris, who publicly acknowledged the department's past failures and pledged continued efforts toward reform. His words were met with cautious applause, a sign that trust was rebuilding, albeit slowly. When it came time for Marcus to speak, the crowd fell silent, hanging on to his every word. He stood tall, scanning the faces of the people who had stood by him through thick and thin. "When this all started, I didn't know what to expect," Marcus began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "All I wanted was for my mother to feel safe in her own home. But as we fought for her justice, I realized this fight was bigger than any one person. It's about dignity, respect, equality, and while we've come so far, our work isn't done yet." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Change doesn't happen overnight. It takes patience, persistence, and most importantly, unity. We've shown that when we stand together, we can move mountains. So let's keep going, not just for ourselves, but for future generations." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the park like a promise for brighter days ahead. Children played on the swings nearby, laughter filling the air, while adults mingled, sharing stories of resilience and hope. Later that afternoon, Marcus found himself sitting alone on a bench overlooking the park. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him, but it was a good kind, the kind that comes from knowing you've given your all for something meaningful. As he sat there, lost in thought, Sarah approached hesitantly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, offering him a warm smile. Marcus shook his head, scooting over to make room. "Not at all." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their drinks and watching the lively scene unfold before them. Finally, Sarah broke the quiet. "Do you think things will stay like this, or will people forget?" "I think some will forget," Marcus admitted honestly, "but others won't. And as long as even one person remembers, the fight continues." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Well, count me among those who won't forget. You've inspired so many of us to keep pushing forward." Her words touched Marcus deeply, reminding him that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about inspiring others to carry the torch. Together they watched as Evelyn laughed alongside Mrs. Thompson, the 2 women chatting animatedly, as if they'd known each other for years. In that moment, Marcus felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in months. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe that real change was possible, not because of one person or one victory, but because of the collective strength of a community, united in purpose. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Marcus whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning." And somewhere within him he knew it was true.